Welcome to part 2 of the two-part IRS Rail webinar series on Rail Baltica opportunities in Europe's latest mega project, presented by the International Railway Summit in association with Rail Baltica. I'm Jules Sommer, the Managing Director of IRITS Events, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this session. You may have noticed that our webcam is not turned on at the moment. This is a joy of live events, and it's the cameras seem to be working at the moment. So apologies if you can't see us and the speakers, but you'll be following the presentations on the screen. At the last count, we had over 200 people from 41 countries registered for today. So welcome to all of you. In part 1, 2 weeks ago, we learned about how Rail Baltica is a recovery locomotive for post-COVID Europe and a key piece of the single European railway area. The European Union, who is paying 85% of the budget, is fully committed to the project, we heard. We also learned about Rail Baltica's intention to be a digital native project and their dig once approach to incorporate other critical infrastructure projects such as digital, 5G, energy and defense, while putting a shovel in the ground for rail construction. If you missed the last session, an on-demand video is available to view on our website, irits.org. Today, we'll be digging deeper into Rail Baltica's innovation and sustainability agendas, incorporating the views of key stakeholders from the sustainability, engineering, regulation, and supply communities, as well as Rail Baltica's leaders in innovation, sustainability, and systems and operation. We are fortunate to have the support of eminent speakers with us today, and we are very grateful to Rail Baltica for their support. We are tweeting live during this webinar. Follow us at Rail Summit, and our hashtag you can see on the screen is IRS Rail Webinars. If you enjoy the session, do continue the debate on Twitter and LinkedIn. Now, once again, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, Simon Fletcher, Director for Europe at the International Union of Railways, UIC. UIC is a technical body representing the global railway sector, and most recently they have been credited for coordinating the sector's approach during the pandemic. Simon has been with the UIC since 2003 and its board member since 2009. He assumed a newly created position of Director for Europe last month, signaling Europe's growing importance for UIC. Simon has worked in the railway sector since 1977. Last time I introduced him at our summit in Warsaw in February, I subtracted 1977 from 2020 to show that he is a seasoned railway man, but he did not seem best pleased with that revelation. So I won't reveal the result of that calculation today. But in any case, he knows one or two things, perhaps more about rail. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Thank you very much, Jules, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm terribly sorry that we're obviously not going to be able to see each other this afternoon, but as Jules said, that's the vagaries of live events and the internet. The session we've got this afternoon over a couple of hours, which we hope will be nicely interactive. You can use the questions facility on screen, and there will be an opportunity to have a discussion through that medium as we go through the presentations that we have from colleagues from Rail Baltica, but also from the Alliance for Logistics, Alice, also from WSP, one of the world's leading engineering companies and consultancy companies, and also from the European Union Agency for Railways, where we have an input from their head of systems. But each of these lady and gentlemen will be introduced as we go through, and we will also have an input from the rail supply industry through the Director General of UNIFE. No, so as I said, please try and make this as interactive as you possibly can, as we possibly can. It's all very strange, all sitting here looking out at whatever it is you're looking at and just talking into a microphone. But it's nice that when people ask questions, because it shows that there's somebody actually out there and listening. I'm going to say no more and hand us over to our sponsor, as it were, and to Andy Billington, who is the head of innovation and sustainability at Rail Baltica. And he is going to be giving us an overview regarding innovation, the magic word that Jules used in his introduction of digitalization. But the most important element perhaps in all of this is sustainability as well, and how Rail Baltica is addressing all of those. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simon. Can everybody see my
Simon, I believe we are launching a poll. Is that right?
Oh yes, we are. I do apologise. I've forgotten that. I can't see it. So there it is. I can see it now. Oh yes, so we're going to do that. Sorry, I beg your pardon. We're going to do that through the event. There are going to be 4 polls. There you see, it's all live again, the questions are on the screen. The first one is on the screen now, in the previous event, everyone who was involved and who answered the question strongly voted for long-term focus as being important. But which aspect of that do you think matters most? You've all got a few seconds to answer that question. You can see that sustainable transport corridor with infrastructure synergies, reducing chance or scale of future subsidies and smart maintenance, optimizing current approach, a modern conventional railway, or seamless multimodal links for both passengers and freight. As they say on all these game shows, vote now. And I have no idea whether it's actually doing anything, Jules, because I can't see anything.
Yes, we've got.
Is it happening?
Yeah, over 60% of the people have voted now. If we
Excellent.
can, we'll close in about 5-6 seconds. If we could, yeah, we've got 3/4 have now voted.
Thank
we'll
you,
give
everybody.
5 more seconds. Yeah, there you go. So here is the
And
result.
there is the result. Oh, it's a bit close, isn't it? But interesting, Andy, that sustainability, but also seamless multimodal links for both passengers and freight, it sort of was coming out neck and neck. But sustainability is one of the things I think you're going to refer to. Over to you.
Thank you. So I would like to start with a brief introduction to the project. For anybody who doesn't know, you can see where we are on the map. I'm sure most of the people who've joined probably know that already. So we will go through very briefly what is Rail Baltica. So obviously we're a railway project, but also beyond that, it's the potential for a new economic corridor development beyond just transport infrastructure. For the rail infrastructure, we will be 1435mm gauge dual track, the Swedish C loading gauge, which is larger than many others, 25 kilovolt electrification with a 25-ton axle load, and up to 1050-meter freight train length. Again, these design parameters are probably above average for most of the railways in Europe at the moment. And we do have the unique opportunity in the whole project. Jean-Marc will talk later about ERTMS, and there is a CCS study ongoing, and he will give you more information about that. As I touched on, this is a greenfield project, so we do have a unique scope to deliver both a state-of-the-art and best-in-class railway, but also the things that can go with that. And that's my main focus at the moment is synergies and other things that we can do. With that opportunity, of course, also comes the responsibility to make sure that we do deliver on the opportunity that we're given, and that we don't deliver something that is just a slight improvement over existing systems. So firstly, when we look at innovation, we can look at the best in class from rail. So that is technology, but it's also services and concepts. So to give you an example of that, if you know of the Mercatalia Fast service, where they have a passenger rolling stock has been converted to handle small and fast freight. That includes cold chain logistics, it includes parcels, and also with a slight extension, it can also be used to integrate things like airport services. So you can, for example, like with the CAT in Vienna, we can integrate luggage handling for passengers if that's a service that the operators wish to launch. Our position as RB Rail is the coordinator, so we will develop technology, we will show services, and we will show concepts. At this point, we have to then hand over to operators to say, what do you, of these things, which do you want to launch? And then we will help with those. But in doing that, we have to look at the services, we have to look at concepts. And so we're looking for best in class, we're looking at solutions from other sectors, for example, air freight handling, and can that be applied to freight on rail? And I think Fernando will touch on that a little. And also we have an unusual opportunity to look at what we've called orphaned solutions. So projects that were started perhaps some years ago, and at the time the technology couldn't quite deliver what was expected. The best example of that is a project that was looking at container handling and transshipment from rail to road, but also would work from 1520 to 1435 for rail. That had problems because it was using wireless connectivity and video analytics about 10 to 15 years ago. And at the time, the technology just wasn't there. As you probably all know, that technology has moved on a great deal since then. And we believe that the current technologies are good enough to support that. So we will look into that and see if that's possible for faster transshipment than you currently would see across the railways and to road, and also for integration at maritime terminals. Within all of that, we do have some scope for running either lighthouse or pilot projects, depending on the scale. Obviously, a lighthouse project is a point proof of concept developed into what could be launched as a service, and pilot we would regard as a cut down version of the service that people could use. Within the overall approach for innovation, we have taken a conscious decision that we're not going to look at primary research. Our project goal is to deliver workable infrastructure, commercially viable infrastructure, not just a railway, but a commercially viable railway. The risk in primary research is not something that we need to take, as I think you'll see as we go through this afternoon. We can adapt solutions from other sectors and projects. That includes solutions and approaches from other transport modes, from other sectors completely, like, for example, sensors from the oil and gas industry, but also a lot of lessons can be learned from the telecoms and IT sectors. We also have taken some decisions that we want to avoid anything that is specific to a particular supplier or a rail-only solution. We want to be able to genuinely integrate and provide seamless intermodal transport. That is probably going to be much more difficult if we have a vertical industry approach and we say this works, this is how it's done in rail. We need to look wider, we need to look at transport in general. We also, in these opportunities, we can look at whether it's open data or modular and open systems design and see how that will help with job creation and opportunities. One of the key things that we have as a fantastic resource in this region is there's a great deal of digital knowledge and skill, and we believe that we can create opportunities for companies, both small and large, throughout this region, but also the wider European environment and beyond, to come and help, to come and see what can be done. And if we have data in open formats, where we have a specification that is either in current use or is in early development, then that is an easier opportunity to persuade people to work with. One of the things we will be able to do, we hope, is run some initial evaluations, some pilots and some lighthouse projects, and start gathering data at quite an early stage. Even while construction is going on, we should be able to do some testing alongside existing infrastructure, both here and elsewhere in Europe. Excuse me just a moment. So with digitalization, again, we are a greenfield. We don't have legacy IT that we need to integrate with. We also don't have legacy business processes, which means we can look at more modern, capable IT. We can look at communications technologies that have come from the data center sector, from the big hyperscale computing companies who have put a vast amount of effort into environmentally friendly and sustainable and low power IT infrastructure. They may have hundreds of thousands of servers, but the power drawn by each one therefore becomes absolutely critical. We can maximize that. We can look at things like UAVs. We can look at fiber along the side of the track. And also we can look at techniques like RFID for vehicle tracking, for maintenance, for asset tracking, and also even for tracking of individual items of cargo. That also integrates with the potential for air rail integration when we can look at the same RFID standards, the same asset tagging standards can be used across all of the sectors that I've just touched on. We also, again, have a great deal of experience and knowledge in this region about integrating different systems, different organizations, and even different governments with secure, audited, tracked data transactions. And as I said at the bottom, we view digitalization as a tool. It's not a goal. I think we've probably all been at events where you get the impression that a speaker is saying, we will be digitalized by whatever date. It's not a goal in its own right. It is a tool to help business, to help drive commercial viability and to drive sustainability. So again, as I said, our approach is we don't have legacy. We can adapt from other sectors. We can look at the models such as hybrid computing, where some is on premises, some is in a cloud. We don't need to look at a particular cloud. There are approaches that are available in modern systems where even the cloud can be completely independent of a particular vendor. We have a lot of scope where there are published standards already. Not all of those standards may be rail industry. Some of them will come from, let's call it Internet of Things. Some will come from the IT and telecom sectors. And a lot of that processing can be done either at the edge or in a core or in a cloud. So where I have what we've referred to as location independent functions, you could, as an example, have a sensor at the wayside which gathers data. If the data goes outside a particular range, the wayside sensor generates an alarm or alert. If it's within a normal tolerance, then a core system may say, this is a part of a trend and we should be following this trend. But also that same data can then go into, for example, into a cloud environment for big data analysis, and we can take it on from there. Sustainability, obviously, I think everybody knows the Sustainable Development Goals. We are looking at economic development. We're looking at infrastructure and industry opportunities, transparency, climate and energy. The point I would like to make on this one is that sustainability does not just mean environmental goals. It does mean job creation. It does mean economics. It means developing infrastructure. And the final slide, I will go through that one, sorry. We're looking at life cycle, not just construction. Opportunities, as I've just said. We will look at synergies with rail construction and with digital infrastructure. So the dig once approach that you might have seen in some cities around the world, we can actually adopt that and use on the whole infrastructure. So while we do have a construction crew building railway infrastructure, they can also be installing, whether it's duct or actually installing fiber itself. So that can help with things like 5G rollout, but also with rural broadband connectivity, with the EU Wi-Fi connectivity projects, and with next generation access networks for socioeconomic drivers such as schools, hospitals, business centres, and so on. With all of that, we can look at a more attractive, scalable platform, not just for rail freight, but also for passenger services. And with a modular approach, we can look at flexibility for the long term. So our themes are, we will adapt and transfer technology from other sectors where possible. We will actively look for synergies, both within rail and within other sectors, transport, digital infrastructure. We will look at partnerships and alliances to help with that. And also when we're talking about lighthouses and pilot projects, we look at the operational evaluation of equipment before it's deployed in the real infrastructure. I think the adage is measure 9 times, cut just once. And all of this, we believe, will help us maximize the potential of our greenfield opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy, very much indeed. And if we were all physically in a room, we'd all be giving you a big round of applause now, but you'll just have to accept it virtually from me on behalf of all.
I'm sorry I overran, Simon. Please don't tell me off.
Don't worry, that's a point you owe me. Don't worry, we shall do that later. Now I can see that there are some questions already coming in on the question thing. That's excellent. Keep them coming, because what we will do is later on, and those of you that are raising your hands in the chat facility as well, we'll come back to you. But right now, we'll do that a little later on. Right now, I'd like to move us on to our second speaker for this afternoon. He already got a bit of a sort of a warm-up, as it were, from Andy in that previous presentation, because this is Fernando Liesa, who is the Secretary General for the Alliance for Logistics Innovation through Collaboration in Europe, also known as ALICE. And he's going to give us a perspective from where he is about integrated transport. And again, the message here is about sustainability and making sure that we have an efficient logistics process. Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Very happy to be here with you today for this webinar. I think you can see now my screen. First of all, I would like to introduce a bit my organization. It's the Alliance for Logistics Innovation through Collaboration in Europe, and everything is in the name. We are a platform for innovation, open innovation through collaboration. We have a mandate to deliver a research and innovation agenda for Europe, but also for countries and companies. And to do that, what we do is to analyze trends, technologies, and societal needs, so then we can envision how logistics should look like in future. And from there, we provide the recommendations. We have a formal mandate from the European Commission, so then we feed in these research and innovation needs in the research and innovation programs, Horizon 2020 and now Horizon Europe. We also do a follow-up on the technologies, research and innovation projects and implementation projects and lighthouse projects like Rail Baltica to see how our roadmaps are implemented, so then we can feed into our activities. And then more on who we are. I think we are in ALICE a very quite unique organization, as we have among our members representatives from the various stakeholders in the logistics and supply chain. We have companies, but we have also associations representing those segments, and that's give us a great opportunity to bring an holistic overview and vision for freight transport and logistics. And also we in our network, we also support our members to find other members for these open innovation projects. So looking into our vision, what we realized 3 years ago is that we needed to move logistics towards an approach in which we could do logistics with zero emissions or close to zero emissions. We recognize maybe it's not possible to go completely to zero emissions, and then we need to offset part of the emissions, but we really need to target very high when we look into the future. And that's why we developed this roadmap that is available in our webpage, and it's indeed a framework and process for development of roadmap towards zero emission logistics 2050. And here, what we do is to try to support companies to look into how they can truly and fully decarbonize their supply chains and logistics. We had identified, based on Alan McKinnon's book on decarbonization, 5 different areas of decarbonization. And among all these 5, I think for today's webinar, there are 2 that are very relevant. And one is on transport modes are smartly used and combined. We truly believe that if we want to move efficiently towards a paradigm without emissions, we really need an increase of the use of rail. It needs to be affordable, reliable for the customers, and also to address this and to make this happen, we also need to look into how we can really achieve that fleets and assets are shared and used to the max. And then we really believe in Alice that to make the assets use, meaning transport modes, then we need to open those services and be accessible for the end users. And I will come back to this afterwards. Then, of course, we really believe that we also need to transition the assets and look into that the assets are more energy efficient and then they use renewable energy. But what we see is that these 2 last solution areas are the ones that are more prominent now. We see how technology is developing and will need to invest on those, and then we see that the first 3 solution areas could indeed make the transition more affordable. And how, and then this will go later on this. But then in this slide, I would like to rise, even if our roadmap is started in 2050, we also recognize how important is to start moving very fast. And here it's the sense of urgency and the sense of dimension of the challenge that I want to share with you. In the left side figure, we see that if we would have peak emissions in 2016, we would have had, or we could have afford a very soft transition towards zero emissions in many years. But the longer we wait to peak our emissions, the sharper the transition will need to be. And here you can see, or you can envision, if this transition, if we wait until 2025 to peak our emissions, how we are going to deliver that. Then the other is in magnitude. I was astonished with when Professor McKinnon shared this slide, that at the end the conclusion is that even with the COVID-19 rate of CO2 reduction, if we could sustain this rate of reduction, we would slightly be above the climate objectives, or being within the 1.5 degrees. So here the sense of urgency to start acting, but also the dimension of the problem. Then on how we need to move into this, and here I will make it very, very simple. I would also like you to go through our document on the truly integrated transport system for sustainable and efficient logistics. We really believe that we can do a lot more of what we are doing today with the transport system we have. The issue is that that system is indeed not working as a system. It's working very siloed fashion, not connected, not properly used, with a lot of idle capacity, and that is not finding the demand, and that's why we are advocating for this concept of the physical internet, that it's more looking into interconnected logistics networks, and then that the assets can be shared and open, and then we can really move into this. But of course, we also need to look into the users and how they plan and they work with the transport. And then we need to also achieve consolidation of flow, so then it's more sustainable. Then if we move what this means in particular for rail freight, we are strongly collaborating with Shift2Rail joint undertaken, and we have had a few workshops with them, and here is also a document I could share with you if you wish, and is really addressing on the needs. First of all, if we want to achieve the transport white paper objective of the European Commission of shifting 30% of transport above 300 kilometers to rail, this would mean that we need to grow rail freight by 70% in 2030 compared to 2019. And this is where I think, and I think the audience addressed this already, because optimizing current approach is not enough. We cannot achieve this only by optimizing current approach. Then the question we have is that how we make available the required capacity for this growth. It's we see it's very complex to make capacity available for rail freight. So then this is a very important question: how maintenance times, how use times could be reduced, so then and certain operations that are not value added but are needed for security could be reduced, so then we achieve to increase capacity for rail freight. And then the third and last one is that we need to create or you need to create a seamless rail freight experience for the users, so then the users can have more visibility of rail services, because it's very complex even to know these transport services and to move to a more seamless booking. Then also flexibility following the shipping example. And here is stop selling trains, but we need to sell transport, and the modular approach that was mentioned by Andy. Then additionally, the need of visibility of the location of cargo, and really to provide end-to-end services, because at the end rail is part of the transport chain, but normally it's not addressing last mile. So then last mile need to be seamless, and last but not least, that reliability it's more important than speed. And that's all on my side. Just to finish with two quotes. The first one is that greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. And then this is indeed also going with the second one, that the best way of predict the future is just to create it. And thank you very much, everybody.
Fernando, thank you very much indeed. Some interesting food for thought, and we'll perhaps come back to a couple of the points that you've highlighted when we get to the chat, when we get to the Q&A session towards the end. And of course, as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, don't hesitate to forward any questions that you may have that you wish to ask later on. So as we conclude our first half of this session, I'd like to introduce you to Juliana Motz, who is a principal engineer at WSP, and she's going to be giving us a bit of an overview for the next 10 minutes about how you design sustainable and connected future mobility. And probably how that relates to the Rail Baltica project as a specific focus. But Juliana, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. And there we go. Thanks for having me. So I'm here to talk about, I've prepared a presentation based on the literal theme of the day, which is designing the sustainable and connected railway, except I've subverted the genre a little bit, and I've gone with future mobility, because I would like to show you how we widen the scope and go through some thought exercises to think about this journey. So, sorry, I'm just having a little technical difficulty. There we go. Sorry about the lag. So about me, I'm a railway engineer and I work in the future mobility part of WSP, which is a global design consultancy and engineering. I was originally inspired by the high-speed railways of Japan, the maglev trains, and that spurred my career into physics, engineering, and I grew up in Silicon Valley though, so we have very few trains. It's not a thing that we're exposed to, and we definitely don't have any high-speed trains. So I actually moved to England in 2011 to pursue a railway engineering degree and to build railways. So moving on from there, if I can get my slides to come with me. So how do we design the sustainable and connected future mobility that I've spoken about today? So the future mobility, what we do in our team, we don't have a title of a specific mode of transport because what we're actually looking at is all the things that influence transport. And then from there, we use the evidence to determine what the modes actually need to be and what the mobility need is. And sometimes that mobility need is, now that we have the internet, we've removed the need to travel, or now that we have different digital access or delivery access, different delivery modes and freight modes, maybe that's replaced journeys for people. So mobility itself is changing faster than the railways. That's why I've emphasized the term mobility rather than the term railway, because we're delivering this future railway here, but the technology for high-speed rail hasn't changed dramatically in 60 years, and the technology for railways is roughly the same after 200 years. So it's that kind of thing. What else has changed in the last even 5 to 10 years? Possibly autonomous vehicles. I don't necessarily think they're going to be as hyped up as they currently are, but things like drone deliveries, things like different first mile, last mile modes and micromobility modes. So, and people's attitudes are changing as well. And some of that's actually hurting the railways and how people perceive them. So these mobility systems, they don't exist in a vacuum, and yet, the railway and how we design it and what we can control or what we think we can control is sort of still stopping at the same places it always was, which is at the railway boundary. And sure, we can make it look nice and we can create some forecourts and connections, but it's not really serving the whole journey, which is, door to door, it's first mile, last mile, it's also the middle mile, that's the railway. So I would call, railways now, it's sustainable but disconnected when we're talking about sustainable and connected railways. The railway is different from other modes, and I think that Rail Baltica is really one of the most exciting projects in the world because of the complexity and the attitude towards changing and delivering something with really the type of purpose we would want to see, something that benefits the economy, society, and the environment all at the same time, not just thinking about the mobility aspect. So the good news is in order to deliver this future mobility, it's a nice shiny word. And we have a lot of things that have already, been invented, as Andy was saying. We don't need to invent everything from scratch, and we do actually want things that have been commercially proven. So the good news is, mobile apps, digital connectivity, first mile, last mile, solar panels, electric technology, the prices come down. We have a lot that we get to benefit from just by nature of the time in which we're building. But at the same time, we have this vision of the future, and me being from Silicon Valley, I can tell you that vision of the future kind of scares me, and it comes off as dystopian because the conversation is never actually about public transit as much as we might say shared ride hailing, ride sharing. It's all private transport. It's it's Hyperloop. It's people thinking, oh, I'm going to have this imaginary train that takes me instantly anywhere I want to go. Why would I ever need a high-speed railway? And it's hurting the narrative. And I would call this, these technologies are connected, but they're ultimately unsustainable. And I would say also most of them are never going to happen. So we need to control that narrative, and we need to do a better job of fulfilling this mobility journey that people say that they want. So the good news is we have all these friends already to help us deliver it. There's these mature technologies that we will definitely need to connect with. There's electrified modes, there's people-powered modes, there's micromobility, there's digital connection. So I would call that sustainable, but the connectivity that, of course, we have to work on that as railway engineers and designers of these systems. But maybe there's a few things we could probably learn from Silicon Valley. Why do startups like to think about Hyperloop instead of railways? Why do university students participate in Formula One competitions instead of building railway projects? What are our customers ultimately looking for? Why have they chosen ride-hailing over public transportation? So how does our thinking actually need to change, seeing as how we've got some gaps to deliver this sustainable and connected railway? So what we think about in the future mobility team is we think about people, place, and activity, right? We think about the actual customers, the places they need to go and the types of places that they're going, or that their goods are going, or that their services are coming from or going to, because obviously we want freight and passenger to be integrated. And we need to look at all the activities so that, if we have the advantage of agglomerating activities, say Amazon parcel lockers at a station, these sorts of things, we can eliminate other journeys and we can increase the favorability of using the railway. So what we use is a people-centric approach. We need to look at, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are not things, I work in the future mobility team now, but when I was designing a station, I was working in rail engineering as my job title. I didn't necessarily think about, all of these sorts of things. We were told this is your design standard, this is what you're going to design to. We were not necessarily, other than some disabled access, thinking about all these sorts of other needs. And we definitely never were told, and how is your design actually going to make people happier and deliver an experience that makes them choose other modes? So we also need to project the outcomes that we want. And I think Rail Baltica is doing a good job of that, is saying, we want to be transformative in other areas, just the physical space or the environment. So that's what actually brings us to our customer-focused design, whether that's our passengers or our freight customers. And then how does our industry need to change to deliver this? So, okay, if you're thinking of who is commissioning a railway, this is obviously Rail Baltica is going to be more complex than this, but you've got the local government, the national government, and I'm going to say the people who actually plan railways or have the railway knowledge are not necessarily interfacing with all of the levels of the people who are specifying the railways, or who are specifying roads or other public transport. So I think that's our first disconnect already. And I'm going to say, when we have an existing railway infrastructure owner or company or a train operating company, who's making the decisions? Because, well, in the UK anyway, they were still using steam trains up into the 1960s. And the people who maybe used that in their youth and then went into British Rail and these sorts of things are going to have a different vision of what a railway looks like than people who have grown up with the internet for most or all of their life and have used smartphones as their primary means of, access rather than something with steam in it. And I've put a cheeky symbol in the middle. They're usually mostly white male, is most of these organizations, and I'm going to say that's not representative of everything that we've said we need. So even in my company and my journey, this is the blue one represents rail engineering, or our engineering part of the business, and the pink is the advisory part of the business. And I actually, as I said, I was never working on the strategy. I never got to have a conversation about climate change and ticketless travel and joining up, integrating with mobility, not in a meaningful way that I could influence, until I moved out of rail engineering as a discipline and into transport and planning and advisory. So, and to this day, I'm the only person with a specialist railway engineering degree who sits in that transport discipline. So that's kind of telling us, you know, well, is this similar for other people who are looking at these designs? Do people have all the skills and the mindsets that they need? So that's the kind of concluding for, you know, this sort of thought exercise is who's asking for the railways and who's got that initial vision, who's designing them, designing railways, designing transport. We know that everyone needs it, but who are we leaving out? What are we missing when we're thinking of the journey and the service and the actual customer of this railway? And we're the railway part, that's what we're talking about, but it's that full future mobility journey, or just mobility in general. So I'll conclude with, you know, just the takeaways of this sustainable and connected railway that we want, which is ambitious and it's different and it's unique. And who is designing it, who's running it, and who's using it. And I'm ending with a picture of Young Rail Professionals, which is a volunteer-run, not-for-profit organization of which I've been on the leadership committee for 8 years. And this is a picture of our leadership. And I can tell you it doesn't look anything like the leadership in the railway industry in the UK, but it's the vision that we want to see, is that people of different backgrounds and needs and experiences bringing this into the design process. And, you know, we're welcoming in the next young people, because, you know, obviously everyone who's suited up here is we're millennials and a few Gen Z, but I've, you know, included a picture of my niece who in a little railway outfit, corrupting her early in the wheels of the railway. And, you know, it's ultimately also going to be her railway. So millennials are the largest section of the workforce currently. Will we be when other high-speed railways are coming in? Possibly, but not forever. So that's the space that I want us to think about when we think about the future. Thank you very much.
Juliana, thank you very much indeed for that very enlightened insight into designing the future. Maybe we can try and come back onto a couple of those points as well in a moment. Now, just before we move into a couple of questions, I just want to remind anybody who may have joined fairly recently and may have missed the opening of this session. I'm afraid the cameras are not working today, and we've got a bit of a glitch with the system, so that's why we're working on voice only. And I'm based on what Juliana was just saying, it's probably just good that you can't, just as well that you can't see a slightly thinning on top 60-something railway professional, because I may not fit I might fit the stereotype that Juliana was just trying to tell us about. Interesting. Can we move then to Jules and your team, please, to the next poll before we get into the next questions? If that can be zuzzed up on the screen, that would be excellent. And as we've done with the previous ones, you will get an opportunity, not very long, but an opportunity to vote using. But it appeared and then disappeared again, Jules. So I don't quite know what's happened to it. Have we got a problem?
Sorry, I think we'll need to go. Yes,
oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as you can see, you should be able to respond to this poll. Synergies across sectors, infrastructure and services can deliver long-term benefits, but how is this best delivered? Technology demonstrators or pilot projects, studies and policy papers.
Sorry, Simon, I think there's some issue with the poll. We'll need to skip this poll. We'll come back to this poll a little bit later on in the program.
Okay, that's again the vagaries of live. It's a bit like
apologies.
As long as you don't want to song and dance out of me, that's fine.
No,
now
we'll come back to that. This poll.
Okay, so we've heard three excellent sort of insights into the Rail Baltica itself. And the sustainable element of the role of Rail Baltica. We've also heard about from the Alice platform about logistics and also from Juliana about the design of the future system. Andy, there were a lot of you highlighted a lot of opportunities, and in fact, perhaps you didn't touch on as many as you could have done across the transport and digital infrastructure. And you'd like, as I think you said in your presentation, to build on the region's well-known digital reputation. But you've also been clear that as a CEF-funded project, you're not pursuing blue sky research. How are you balancing those two areas and addressing those topics?
Thanks, Simon. It's an interesting question because it is definitely a balance. We are not. It's partially risk management. We don't want to take the risk associated with the blue sky research because obviously research can have positive outcomes and not so positive outcomes. But what we can do is we can use the greenfield to say we can run evaluations and pilots of what you'd see referred to as maybe technology readiness level 7. So things that have left the lab where there's a prototype available, but maybe it's not in widespread use yet. Perhaps we can pilot that because obviously during the construction phase, we do have some time and it's not as if the entire railway was going to be built at exactly the same time. So some infrastructure will become available before others. The other thing that we can consider is an awful lot of things like wayside sensors are not specific to 1435 railway, and then also not specific to a particular geography. So they don't necessarily need to be tested on the Rail Baltica infrastructure right from the start. What we hope to do, and this touches on the digital side as well, is establish a digital backbone where we can collect data from sensors during testing. We also have a very busy digital team within our design and engineering function, with most of our design work, most of the sort of CAD world being migrated into a BIM environment. So we should have a real life digital twin, if you like, during the construction phase. So we'll be able to run simulations against that. And it's obviously possible that when we have sensors, we'll be able to feed live data into a mirror of what the infrastructure will be when it's built. So we can tune sensors, we can build a data lake that we can then say to other people, here is the data that we will have available. Here is the data that Rail Baltica infrastructure and operators will have access to. What can we do with it? Which touches on life cycle costs, maintenance, but also data integration with maritime, with air, with other railways, obviously, and potentially with some road transport.
And it'll be interesting, I think, to be able to use then Rail Baltica as a bit of a, if I've understood what you're suggesting, a little bit of a test bed for some things that almost, and maybe we can come back to that later on in respect to innovation and the role that Rail Baltica could play in testing or evaluating some of the solutions that are being identified elsewhere. So we'll hold that thought. Thank you for that, Andy. Fernando, you were talking a little earlier about your physical internet concept. But one of the things that struck me slightly is that how do you feel that is going to help with freight in regions and smaller towns if the focus is on intermodal terminals and big hubs, and are we going to be I don't know, relying on a different type of mode in the future to help to finish the last mile distribution and so on? I don't know if you can comment on that particular aspect.
Yeah, at the end of the day, when we look into the physical internet, it's more a concept on how we can better use current assets and infrastructure. So it's not really needing additional infrastructure or assets. It's just to make them available and used in a different way and a better way. If, of course, and then at the end is filling in the capacity, really make it available, accessible, and usable, and affordable, of course, because if not, it's not going to be used. But we see a lot of empties, a lot of idle times, waiting times, and there is a number of sources of inefficiencies that we need to work on. And then these inefficiencies could make the transition more affordable to green assets. And in regards to the last mile, I think we see now it's very complex, and we have there are different models going on e-commerce, and we see most of those models are from a freight transport and logistics point of view not sustainable. They are sustainable because they are part of a broader scope. When we go into the big e-retailers, they are all losing money, and that's also creating a lot of burden into the transportation. And indeed, it's not addressing a real need. It's actually a positioning in the market of these players to get market share. It's not because it's really needed, but it's working. But I think all this will be, the more we advance into the need to deal with climate change, the faster these unsustainable behaviors and movements from companies will be dropped.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I'm going to finish this little session with a question to each of you, but I'm going to ask Juliana to kick us off with an overview of in your presentation, Juliana. You mentioned a whole load of different opportunities and different options, and making sure that we were seeking input from a wide group of stakeholders at all ends of the age spectrum, but also from other modes, I guess, as well. And how this is, as I say to each of you, how do you feel that adopting common approaches and ideas from other sectors will allow the railway sector overall, but I guess Rail Baltica in particular, because that's where we are focusing on, to deliver a sustainable digital system that may actually help with more than just transport, because of the social sort of interaction and interfaces outside of the direct railway system itself. I mean, I don't know how if you could sum that up in a short sort of 30-second soundbite, Juliana.
Okay, that's a big task. So yeah, I think I'll go at it from the angle that I touched on, which is the skills end of things. Is that, you know, the things that the transport planners get to look at, the things that, you know, market research people get to look at, the things that, you know, people designing apps get to look at, they're all absolutely relevant for the transport that we're trying to deliver. And I would just say that we would want to bring in those skills, and, you know, we see which skills need to be brought in-house, or which skills need to be, you know, interfaced with or worked with as partners or stakeholders together. But it is that kind of thing, is just challenging, because we know we're looking in different areas in terms of infrastructure and technology, then also challenging, you know, the skills that we're looking for and who we think has a valid input to this design, what insights they can bring from their experience.
Thank you. And Fernando?
From my point of view, I think it's the issue, or I like a lot Juliana approach on the people side. I think indeed there is where the main question is, and the main answer probably.
quite clearly with people, of course, this is an area at the moment you're very much focused on process, Andy, I guess, but in the future, of course, people will play a significant part in the Rail Baltica life as it becomes more of a thing, shall we say?
Absolutely. We need to look at. It's quite easy to look at transport infrastructure if you just consider freight and you have just boxes. If I know it's not that simple, but if you have boxes to consider, that's a very different thing. We have to consider people and the implications and the potential impact that the infrastructure will have on people's lives. One example would be shortening the distances and the times between cities. If Riga Tallinn becomes under 2 hours instead of more than 4, that's going to make quite a bit of a difference to people who do that journey quite regularly. And for some people, it might mean that they can now do that journey more and they wouldn't have done it before. So we have to factor all those things as well, yes.
Andy,
but I was sorry,
yes,
if I can, I was referring also more the people running the show. I had a conversation with a new e-retailer, and they told me, okay, the first thing we do is we don't hire people that are more than 45, 50 years, because we don't think we can move in this. So then I think this is very important that we address this: who designs, who uses, who really envisions this. I think it's very, very important, these complementary teams for addressing this.
Thank you very much indeed, Fernando, and thank you very much indeed, everybody, to Juliana and to Andy as well for this first session. I'd like, if I may, to move us now into
Simon. The second poll is now ready to show. If you'd like to, yes.
Okay. Let's if we can get back to the right. So here we go then. This is the second poll. Synergies across sectors, infrastructure and services can deliver long-term benefits, but how is this best delivered? So you've got 4 options: technology demonstrators or pilot projects, studies and policy papers, partnering, which is transport innovation, sustainability hubs, or a combination of these, but of course, focusing on practical activities. You can all vote now. And as you are voting, I will move us then into our second session, which is focusing a little more on a bit of a deep dive, as it were, into subsystems. And the first speaker this afternoon, or in this session, is the head of Railway Systems Unit at the European Union Agency for Railways, otherwise known as the ERA, Pio Guido, who is going to be giving us an overview on innovation and harmonization within the single European railway area. For those of you who are up on these things, of course, this is the aspiration of the European Commission, the European Union, to create this single European railway area. Very interestingly, a combination of all of those, dare I say that might be a bit of a cop-out, but certainly one of the smallest answers in the poll was studies and policy papers. So it's much more about practical elements rather than necessarily writing lots of papers. Anyway, tell us how it all fits in with your perspective of things, Pio.
Hi, good afternoon. I think that's, I would like to see maybe the possibility to share my screen. I think that's, you should be able now to see that.
Oh no, yes, you can
now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to take part into this event, and I look forward to continuing this interesting discussion. The focus of my contribution is that the railways can really be the safe, affordable, sustainable backbone of mobility, but only with the European dimension. We need the single European rail area if we want to unlock the economies of scales and to access the best research, manufacturing, and human resources that we need. And in fact, I work for the European Union Agency for Rail, as you said, Simon, and we were established to give our contribution to the single European rail area. Since 2005, we've been developing the technical and the safety rules, and to remove the national barriers thanks to the help of an extensive network of specialists from all over the sector. But now, in addition to this regulatory work, since 1 year, since the 16th June 2019, we are also an authority. We certify the safety systems of the rail operators that want to have business in international traffic, and we issue the authorization for placing on the market the railway vehicles, the locomotive, the freight cars, the train sets, etc., if they are intended for international traffic. And this transition went smoothly and successfully. The transposition will be completed for the last member states, including Estonia and Lithuania, for example, not later than the 31st of October. Today, we have already more than 8,000 vehicles running with an authorization issued by the agency. But even when we have reached this harmonization at the level of how to authorize vehicles, their design must still take into account all the specificities and the variety of technical constraints that are necessary to enable them to run on the different infrastructure system. And Rail Baltica, as mentioned, is unique compared to the rest of the EU in terms of a greenfield approach. But the existing railways were developed and optimized for decades within the national boundaries by national integrated railways in close cooperation with national suppliers. It is a real challenge to find a migration strategy to replace progressively this fragmented technical and operational landscape. The railways are a networked system with multiple actors with conflicting business and economic interests. There is no possibility of a significant local innovation. To move ahead, we need a coordinated approach with technical specifications, with clear migration strategies and well-defined obligations and rights. And this is one of the key roles of the agency. We facilitate the consensus among the railways, the suppliers, the national authorities, to define the binding rules that are applicable to the whole railways in Europe, and to ensure that those rules remain relevant and enable innovation. The railways have excellent credentials as a green and safe mode of transport, but we are challenged to reach our full potential by the progress that we witness, that we see in the other transport modes, and by technological innovation. This is very well known and very high in the priorities of the European Commission. When they were setting the priorities, the 6 Commission priorities for their mandate 2019-24, 3 of them are very relevant for railways: a European Green Deal, meaning striving to be the first climate neutral continent, a European fit for the digital age, and an economy that works for people. Because in the end, again, also transport is a means. I mean, it's not an end in itself. And this strong link between the high-level political strategies and priorities and our daily work in the details of railway rules and standards is something that we are trying to define very clearly with a detailed explanation, with a table that we are sharing on our website of how all the different work of the different experts in the various domains of electrification, control, commands, infrastructure, rolling stock are linked to deliver on those 3 important priority objectives that we have. And the objective is to make sure that in a very quick time, meaning end of 21, end of next year, we will have a revised set of TSI, technical specification for interoperability, that will enable to take on board what we call the game changers, the relevant innovation, which is at a sufficient maturity level to be really used in the next project for rail. One example very well known and already mentioned, for example, is ETCS. ETCS is one of the examples of the complexity to enable and promote innovation and to maintain harmonization at European level. It is 30 years that we are struggling with ETCS, and the fact is that we have always been late with all the target that we have set for ourselves in Europe in terms of deployment of the system. But when we look at the possibilities that we have on a greenfield approach, and if we think, for example, on the barriers and the problems that we see today with the definition of the correct EMC, the electromagnetic compatibility between rolling stock, between locomotives and track circuits, today, this is a major source of burden, problems, issues, delay, and risk for the authorization of locomotives. What can be done with level 3 is really to get rid of all this infrastructure and really do a new way of enabling the railways to deliver on a real modern way of transporting people and goods. The evolution of the communication system that was also mentioned in the frame of Rail Baltica. We are seeing the transition to 5G in the public telecom, and we know that currently in Europe, the system that is mandated and used by the railways is a 2G system, the GSM-R, which is going to be in obsolescence sometime after 2030. Here also, we have an additional complication that is not only a railways only project. We have to make sure that we take into account, for example, the spectrum regulation, for which we are a small player. We have absolutely no influence compared to the big players that we see in public operators, or the standards that are defined for million or hundreds of millions of users compared to the numbers that we have in railways. Another important innovation that we are looking at with the sector is the digital automatic couplers. Here, we are the only continent that is lagging behind in the adoption of this type of technology, with traditional screw coupling for the freight wagons. We know that central couplers perform better in terms of load, stability, etc. Automatic couplers can really be game changers for the freight business, and also an answer to the aging workforce and the way to reduce human errors and difficult working conditions in train preparation. But we have the possibility to jump ahead from our delay if we take on board not only the automatic, pneumatic and mechanical coupling, but if we integrate also the digital connections between the freight wagons. This will really be a game changer, for which, on the other hand, we are confronted with the complexity of defining a credible migration when we are talking about more than 500,000 wagons and 10,000 locomotives all over Europe. So we need to make sure that we learn the lessons from the other game changers that we are working with, EATMS included, and we start with the sound business case and the clear migration strategy to introduce this possibility. And this is in fact one of the important elements that we are discussing with the sector, how to achieve a modular description of the architecture for the rail system, so that all the possible different innovation that we have will certainly be seen in the frame of a total model that will enable us this plug and play approach to innovation. And my last slide is to say that all this work is only possible because we have a consultation process that guarantees the representation of all interested stakeholders, and the collective effort and the competence of the expert from the sector is essential for the success of all those initiatives. Not only the technical competencies, but the economic business case inputs are essential. Thank you for your attention.
Pio, thank you very much indeed, and perfectly within the 10 minutes. So absolutely well done. Thank you very much for that. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of things which Pio has mentioned, which we could happily come back to when we get to the opportunity to have the Q&A session at the end. Just a reminder that if you want to ask a question, you can do that using the questions panel on the system here. There are already quite a few questions there, so we will come back to those. But also you can put your hand up by using the on the panel on the right hand side of the screen, whichever way you've got it on the screen there as well. That's in the attendees session. You can click on the little green hand and put your hand up. Somebody has had their hand up for the last well, since the beginning of the session, so I hope that that we can come back to that question in a moment. Right, I'd like to move us then, if I may, to a presentation from Philip Citron, who is the Director General of the Association of the European Rail Industry, otherwise known as UNIFE, who is going to tell us a little bit about how Rail Baltica sets an example of a digital, interoperable and well-connected European railway, or at least it will when it's finished. Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's always a pleasure to be in, even if it's only a virtual meeting with you as a moderator. I would like to thank as well the IRITS organizers for this, organizing this conference. Just to say a few words about the UNIFE, it's the Association of European Rail Industry. We represent the train manufacturers, the rail control company and infrastructure companies. There are more than 100 companies in our associations, which are coming from all Europe. And of course, we work with all the other associations who are promoting rail in Europe. And Rail Baltica, for us, is of course a very important project. It has been said that it's a greenfield project, but UNIFE has always supported this project, which, as you know, has a clear European added value, such as better connectivity between the Baltic states and the rest of the EU, as well as the big contribution we have. Rail Baltica will have a big contribution to the EU climate goals which have been mentioned. What is important for you to know, but I think that you all read the newspapers, is that we are entering in a very sensitive period, because tomorrow and after tomorrow, the head of states and head of the governments of Europe, of the EU, will have to start again their negotiation about the budget, what we call a multi-annual financial framework for 21-27 and the recovery plan. Because even if we are in a session about Rail Baltica, it's always important to say that we are in an extremely sensitive period, not only for the rail supply industry, but as well for the railway undertakings and the infrastructure managers. So we really hope that the governments, the members, EU member states, will be able to find an agreement. And what is also important for you to know is that Rail Baltica is the only transport project which has been mentioned by name in the Commission MFF's proposal when announcing the increase of the Connecting Europe facility with additional 1.5 billion. This is very important to see that it shows the importance of Rail Baltica, and the fact that it's the only project which has been mentioned shows the importance of this project. Now, if I continue about digitalization, I think that fostering digital transformation is, as you know, an objective higher than ever on the EU's political agenda, and this has been identified as key for unlocking future growth in Europe. Recently, the CEOs of UNIFE had a virtual meeting with Mrs. Balean, the Transport Commissioner, and the Transport Commissioner said to us that for her, the priority for our sectors was digitalization, ATO and freight. I will come back on this, but it shows that digitalization is, together with the Green Deal, the cornerstone of this European Commission. And you know, they have been the commissioners Vestager and Breton have been tasked to make Europe fit for digital age, which are initiatives focusing on data and artificial intelligence, and that will be certainly a big priority for the next years. UNIFE has just published our second vision paper on digitalization. It's called Rail Fit for Digital Age. You will see those important topics in this document, which is available on the website, about big data, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. And as we are on with the Greenfield project on Rail Baltica, I think it's very important to know that it will be certainly a fantastic tool when you have during the construction of Rail Baltica, and after that, when the Rail Baltica will operate as the railway undertaking, it will be very important to have those new digital tools adopted by them. And we can mention, and this has already been said by Pio a few minutes ago, we have mentioned the importance of the 5G connectivity, the blockchain, and the digital twins. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And I think that the expansion of rail transport and industry digital capabilities is enabled by its innovative strengths. And I think that research and innovation is key for the rail sector to develop those technologies, enabling it to drive forward the digital transformation. You know, you have maybe heard, and I know it's the case with our friends from Rail Baltica who've been very active on this, but Shift to Rail joint undertaking has represented a breakthrough in the rail sector. You know that for the first time, rail's research and innovations efforts were given during the past 5 years, stabilities, continuities, and long terms. And during this 5 years period, I think it has been possible to work together with the suppliers, the operators, the infrastructure managers, the academia, and all of them were able to work together within a collaborative framework. But as we are certainly being listened by a representative from the Baltic states, it's been very difficult to bring Latvian, Lithuanian, and Estonian companies on board, and I hope it will be easier. But for Rail Baltica, I think they could become a key. I think that Shift Rail could become a key project for the deployment of some of the technological solution which will be created by the successor of Shift to Rail. Because as you know, now we are working, and it is part of the negotiation which will be held tomorrow at the level of the head of state and head of government. There is as well the negotiation about what we call Horizon Europe. It's the fantastic research program for the next 6 years, which will be adopted by the Commission. And within the partnership, there is a partnership called Transforming European Rail System, and there with a master document that is, I think, well known by Rail Baltica, and especially for our friend Kaspar Brinskens, where we see that Rail Baltica, as it has been said, must be part of Shift to Rail 2. And because the partnership will conduct large-scale demonstration activities, as has been said by you a few minutes ago, and it will be the natural step for them to be the deployment of the successful results of this program in the strategic European corridor. And Rail Baltica would be certainly one of the most important places where it would be possible to do what you call the testing, the evaluating of Shift to Rail 2. So on these specific things, from what we know is that there is a green light from the Commission to have this Shift to Rail 2. There's not yet, there's no budget official support from the member state, but we know that they are extremely supportive. But they would be certainly very happy to see in the future how can Rail Baltica be part of this important project for the year 21-27. On ERTMS, I don't want to add anything to what Pio has been saying, but of course the deployment of RTMS along the Rail Baltica line will be absolutely essential. And I know that now the 3 Baltic states are very supportive for having this deployment of the baseline 3 level 2 ETCS. And we are also very happy to see the support that we got from the RTMS coordinator, in addition, Matthias Wouters, in addition to Mrs. Trotman, who is the coordinator for this corridor. But I think it would be certainly very important to be sure that the European institution and European member states will support the business case of RTMS, and that we will get in the future RTMS investment program bigger financial support from the EU budget in the 2021-2027 CEF program. This will of course trigger faster RTMS deployment and unlock the economies of scale and efficiency gains that it brings to the rail system. Now, the last thing I wanted to say, because it's a bit sensitive and important, is about the public procurement process. And we know that Rail Baltica is very interested by what we call this new system, which has been adopted by the 2014 EU public procurement, which is called the most economically advantageous tender principle. And we hope that it will be continuously applied in the future implementation stages of Rail Baltica. Because it's extremely important to be sure that it will, when the Rail Baltica will choose award contracts, it will be not only on the concept of price, but there will be other criteria like sustainable development, life cycle costs, or other topics which are extremely important when you launch a tendering process. Then we also know, and maybe this is what I always say, that we have to be careful to be sure that state-owned enterprise from third countries will not make proposals which will be with an abnormally low price and which could create unfair competition. I was very happy to see that the Commission has launched recently a white paper on these topics on state-owned enterprise coming from Asia, and have to be careful if we want to have a level playing field, to be sure that some rules are respected, and that there is also the possibility for UNIFE members to work in some parts of Asia like China, Korea or Japan. So that's what I wanted to say, but on our side, we really think that Rail Baltica is certainly one of the most important projects of the next years. We are really hoping that there will be, because of the COVID crisis, there will not be too many cancellations or postponements of projects, but we are sure that this project, which will link the Baltic states with the rest of Europe, is absolutely essential and has a very clear added value for all of us. So thank you again for having invited me to this seminar. Thank you very much.
Philippe, thank you very much indeed, and I hope you can hang around for a little while longer till we get into the panel discussion, as there may well be a couple of points which you'll be able to help us with as we go into that discussion as well.
Okay, I will be there, no problem.
Thank you, Philippe. Right, I'd like to take us then to our final presenter. Last but not least, we started with Rail Baltica, and now we're going to finish with Rail Baltica as well. Jean-Marc Bedmar, who is the head of systems and operations at Rail Baltica, who's going to give us an overview about the way one of the most important things, and something which Philippe has just touched on in his presentation, about procurement, and a topic which I think is of interest to quite a few of the people who are listening today in the audience. Jean-Marc, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So it's my pleasure to be with you today. And first, could you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes, we can see it, but it's not in full screen. Huh?
Okay, so that's, yeah, I will try to correct that.
That's it? Oh no.
Yes. Now should be better.
Yeah, we're seeing the display. We're seeing it doesn't matter. Keep going. Otherwise we'll be running out of time.
Okay.
We can see all your notes and everything as well. That's the problem.
Okay, so that's. Yeah.
I think if you go into display settings, is that not the where to go?
Yeah. That's exactly. So that's the point, and I will cancel it now, and hopefully now it should be fine. Yeah, sorry.
Go for it.
It was too. Yeah. So yeah, I think I will not only touch the topic of the procurement, but also a little bit some technical aspect, but still link with what we have already discussed today, and especially two previous speakers about the sustainable design of for Rail Baltica. So I will just concentrate on the design deployment for the energy and control command signaling subsystems. However, there is a lot of different aspects of sustainability that we are dealing with in Rail Baltica, especially with all the conception of the operation and maintenance phase, and also in all the design of the infrastructure and the construction phase. But that will be quite too long, and that will be hopefully for another session. Looking for sustainable design of deployment for energy. First part, I will just give a short description about what is Rail Baltica energy subsystem. So this is all the traction electrification system for the railways. We will have 870 kilometers of double track, so that's roughly 2,000 kilometers of catenaries. Capex estimated it was 500 millions and more initially, and we will have then with a 2x25 technology about 13 substations. In the free Baltic state, as you can see on the schematic on the left, we will represent roughly about 3% or more of the energy consumption of the Baltic states. So this is quite a major consumer we will arrive in the future. And of course, there is big influence on the energy sector of the Baltic states to welcome us. We are considering as a main technology to go with 2x25 kV solutions. However, there are still a lot of constraints and different elements who are in the design that are considered, and also other solutions are being analyzed depending on specific case, including the static frequency converter solutions technology, which is quite new and challenging technology. But so the match between different technologies is not completely over. I will explain this on the timeline just a bit later. So if we look the main feature of the NS subsystem, what is a little bit the most I think exceptional aspect that we have compared to standard electrification of railways. The first thing is we are going for the single design concept in the free Baltic states. So that's important. This is, of course, we expect scale and maintenance economy, and to have unified system among 3 countries will be very beneficial. And so that's why RB Rail, as a coordinator and responsible for design, are responsible for this unified design and deployment. So sustainability and life cycle cost requirements are always on the top of the list for all the design of the systems, and that will be of course the case also for the NA. So we are really looking long-term perspective for the deployment of catenary. For example, we have even already decided to specify some component like catenary mass for 100 years, so lifetime. So life cycle cost is really important. We have to look all this highway will be maintained, renewed in long-term perspective. And regarding sustainability and environment, we have the target to have maximization of energy efficiency by optimizing all the railway traction chain. So that basically starts from the high voltage line for the electricity supplier and the grids until the wheels. And so that use, of course, a detailed simulation on specific software, all the behavior of all the elements of the NA subsystems and as well as the grid connections. And using technology like regenerative braking, but also dynamic power demand management at the train level. So that's also called eco-driving. So this is ETO functionality. And that's also mean that the ENA subsystem and CCS subsystem will have a link, will have interface for this functionality. And also that will be also interface with the energy sector, typically the electrical grid. Also the exchanging data in order to make this optimization. We will have also some cross connection with the 50mm railways, which are the legacy railways infrastructure in Baltic states, in order to ensure maximum availabilities of the energy supply. And additionally, and furthermore, we are going to use only renewable electricity from the Baltic state area. So that will include many direct contracts with renewable electricity producers and also certified market supply for the electrical Nord Pool market. So from by this decision, we expect to join the club already with over railways in Europe, Austria, Sweden, Netherlands, just to name a few of them. We are already ensuring the traction of the trains with 100% green electricity. Looking now at the lifetime for energy subsystems, so we have completed our deployment strategy. And we are now in the procurement for our engineer. So engineer will be our main engineer company that will ensure all the staging of the NA subsystem from now. So that will include the concept design. So this is at the moment the time where we are going to make the main decisions for the architecture, the components, the technologies of the NA subsystem. So that will happen from end of this year and next year with this NA engineer. That we later will prepare the design and construction procurement for that will be for the actual preparation of the deployment. So we are expecting to sign mid of 22 this main contract for the deployment of the electrification system in the three Baltic states. So design will follow, and then construction will be also implemented, started for 24 for about 2 years, and then testing commissioning will happen. So then you can see regarding the procurement for the engineering services. So this is already over as we are now completing the first phase of qualification. We got 8 applications for these services, and now we are going to go very soon to second phase. Design construction, as I said, this is for 2022. Will be awarded, so that means start of procurement will be next year. So regarding control, command, and signaling subsystem, you can see the scope of the Rail Baltica CCS subsystem in this around this red dots. Yes, so this is typically one 3-level architecture. When we have the field element control level, then interlocking level, and operation control level. So in the scope of this delivery, all the system will be also UNIFE approach in the three Baltic states. for all this part, and not only the signaling RTMS part will be included in this in the scope for this deployment, but also all the transmission, communication, and low voltage power supply. And we can also say that in this CCS subsystem, I think procurement scope will be most of the item for the digitalization and innovation that will be selected, and that will be subject to the requirement to be included in the scope. So that will be the practical application of all the different initiative and research that we have discussed just before. Looking a little bit further, so now we have a CCS deployment strategy study, which is ongoing, and this is our consultant Rambol has provided some recommendation, which are so far not yet approved, just provisional, but we can already say a word on them. This we want to go to state of the art and further for the CCS, and that's we are really ready to be early adopters of the latest evolution for the CCS standardization, but also for the initiative. Yeah. So initiatives are typically game changer from shift to rail and all other industry innovation, including the ATO functionality and so on. Of course, we have also some timeline to respect, and we have to really, of course, make optimization between the maturity of the initiative, the solution standardization, and our timeline to deliver what public expect from us, that is the trends shall run in around 27. If we look more in detail, so we are ready to write the new release of the TSI. That's we understood expected 2022. I heard that our ERA plan may be to have end of 21, and that will be indeed very interesting for us to have this TSI release as soon as possible in order to implement it in our procurements. We also are going for FRMCS if all conditions are met. So FRMCS part of the new release of the TSI, and yeah, indeed the GSMR, as it was said, was 2G, and we don't see the point to make deployment of a 2G solution of 870 kilometers of greenfield infrastructure for very remaining lifetime of this technology, and for this reason, this is really important for us to understand the maturity of this FRMCS, and to liaise with the industry and all the normalization bodies. We are also looking regarding the standardization of interface by the ULinks initiative, as well for the traffic management for the ATO. So this is also shift to rail output that we are already also considering to select. That could be some more game changers. So this is what we have to analyze from now, and from the time the specification will be ready. But we will try, of course, to implement all the functionalities we are making sense in the context of the Rail Baltica operation, and all, I think, our transport plan and their necessity for the use and their maturity. Some other elements. We have also planned to have advanced coordination function for the intermodal operation with the 50-20 millimeter highway. There will be 2 highways in Baltic state, but there shall be, of course, in a very strong synergy, and especially coming from the passenger point of view. More technically, we will have concentration of the equipment in some block system location, so that will be placed along the line when we'll put the system together and provide one proper access, and that will allow to have better reliability and maintainability of all the systems. minimizing also the copper cable on the open line, just the optical fiber everywhere it's possible, and relying on renewable electricity supply also for the railway systems. Timeline. So we have now, as I said, that deployment strategy, which is ongoing, that will be completed in end of September. Procurement will start immediately after that. So we have already planned the suppliers consultations for engineering services in the beginning of September. So please check our website, and you are all the interesting suppliers are welcome to register. Then procurement will take place, and hopefully contracts will be signed in April next year, and then we'll start one I think very interesting period of detailed specification, when will be the time when all these different functionality, initiative, and requirements will be compiled in what will be the requirements for the actual deployment of the CCS or Rail Baltica. And that will be followed by the procurement for the main contractor for design and build on the overall lines. That is planned to be started end of 21, the procurement, and to be awarded end of 22. And then, of course, detailed design, supply supervision, the construction and supplies and testing will follow. Yeah. So this is briefly an overview for these two systems and what are the effective plan for Rail Baltica for that ones. And thanks a lot for your attention.
Jean-Marc, thank you very much indeed for this detailed, in fact, overview, in particular related to some of the decisions that you guys are taking in Rail Baltica around things like ECCS and GSMR and FRMCS and so on and so forth. Right, now what I'd like to do is we've got quite a few questions that we can pick up on, some of which I suspect are going to be linked to the procurement issues, and it may well be that what we have to do is to leave some of the questions, and that Jean-Marc, in particular, you and Andy can perhaps respond to the people asking the questions offline, as it were. But before we go into that just brief discussion, can we just then launch our third poll, if that's possible, please, Jules? So that the poll is this: procurement models can vary project by project. Which of these do you regard as the most important in selecting a model? Life cycle cost assessment, flexibility to choose best supplier per system/component, fair open opportunities for a wide range of businesses, lowest upfront cost. Now, whilst you're all taking the moment just to vote on that, and indeed it might help with the discussion that's about to come, all the panelists are involved now, and we've got questions coming in from quite a wide range of A, people, and C and B topics, but I will go back as best I can to some of the ones that were asked some time ago, and particularly for those of you who can cast your mind back nearly 2 hours to Andy Billington's presentation as well, and we'll try and take those questions first. But if the poll's finished, perhaps we can show the results, please. Okay. So there were no votes at all for lowest upfront costs. So the flexibility to choose the best supplier seems to be the one that people favor most, but closely followed by life cycle cost assessment. Andy, how does that fit with Rail Baltica's perception on how procurement is going to go ahead?
It fits quite well in that we are looking at life cycle cost for almost every aspect of design work. So having a life cycle cost assessment in procurement is quite important, obviously. It's also the approach that Philippe mentioned, the most economically advantageous. That is also a life cycle, and what life cycle is one element of that as well. It is interesting that the score for the lowest upfront cost was quite as low as it was. Possibly we have a lot of railway people who are not used to the idea of low cost things. But yeah, I think that, returning to what you asked, the important thing is we need to balance life cycle cost and supplier flexibility. We have to be able to choose the most appropriate component. Pio mentioned quite a lot about modularity, and that will also help with life cycle, because obviously if you have a modular system, if one component were to reach end of life cycle, you replace that component, you don't have to replace the entire system. It also means that if you replace that one component, it doesn't necessarily have to come from the same supplier.
Plug and play.
Ideally.
Indeed.
That's one thing, if I could add, that it might be interesting as well. It's Philippe Citron from UNIFE, but together with CR and IAM, we wrote what we call the joint meet guidance. Might be interesting for those who want to know about this. There's been a work done with the three associations together. It's certainly interesting for Rail Baltica to know much more about what we said, but I'm happy to see that these life cycle costs principles, and let's say the meet principle, is well known by Rail Baltica.
Thank you for that, Philippe. Based on the outcome of the poll, Jean-Marc, is there anything you want to add, or has Andy said it all?
No, I believe, Andy say most important, and maybe just to make echo also what Philippe said, that this standardization aspect is indeed is very important for us, and that we of course shall follow this industry last update, and also as part of this sustainability, the approach of standardized interface. It's very important to allow to manage this different lifetime of components.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Okay, now there is somebody who has been on the audience here who's had their hand up since the beginning of this. Marcel van Veldhoven has had his hand up, was itching to ask a question. Marcel, I see you've activated your microphone, so go ahead. The floor is yours. If you could say who you are, where you're from, and very quickly ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, Simon. Hello, everyone. It's Marcel van Veldhoven from Armosa. We have been working in the rail industry for 20 plus years, but I touched the hand by accident, so I have no questions.
Marcel, that's not like you. Normally you've got lots of things to say. Okay, but would you like to ask a question now? You've got the floor. I mean, you go ahead.
Well, one of the questions that is very close on my mind is we look at tremendous activities, terrific activities in Baltica, and the previous seminar was very, very good, and this one was equally good. You're looking into huge investments. The question that I have for anyone who feels most appropriate: how much is asset management, managing the assets over their lifetime, one of the key drivers for making investment decisions, making operational decisions, and what's the thought about having a system to support that?
It's a very interesting question, and it's probably something that virtually everybody on the panel could actually have a little go at. Juliana, based on some of the things that you were speaking and presenting to us about, where does the whole concept of asset management fit into what you were referring to as part of the picture you were painting us early on?
I think the thing that is on all of our minds, but I guess I've spent more of my career fretting about it as a millennial proportionally than people more senior than me, is climate change. you know, that kind of thing, is that it's part of how I've always thought of approaching every project, and it is that sustainability element of, you know, the way we even plan asset management is going to need to change, and there's already this opportunity with a brand new railway to, you know, use all the lessons learned about design for accessibility and reliability modeling and things like that, using proper systems engineering. So we still benefit from current railway techniques, but it is something that, you know, there might be whole new skill sets or even things from parallel industries that we could think about, because we're not the only people who are thinking about massive change to massive assets. So yeah, sort of something in that space about, again, the themes of change and the themes of some different skills.
Jean-Marc, you were talking earlier in your presentation about 100-year lifespan for overhead line masts. Presumably that's part of the strategy that you guys have got in Rail Baltica for the design of your assets, and presumably this fits neatly. This whole point here fits neatly with the thinking that you guys have got in Rail Baltica.
Yeah, that example was is probably the one with the most, let's say, the higher lifetime, at least for the railway system for this component. Yes, but this is something we already implemented, this type of lifetime for catenary mast. So typically was also the same in Denmark electrification. But yeah, we are now studying more in detail these different asset management. This is in order to make breakdown of all the life cycle costs of components, and to answer to a question of our guest, yeah, indeed, this asset management is getting more and more important now, and we are working to prepare hopefully one procurement for asset management systems in the coming years that will be linked to this analysis of overall lifetimes of component.
Thanks. Next another question I've got. Pio, you were saying in your presentation, you were talking about the dates of the publication of the TSIs, and it's widely known, I think, that 2022 is the target at which you are aiming. And I know that yes, Jean-Marc was saying earlier in his presentation, the sooner the better, as far as he is concerned. But can you link that date of 2022 and the other point that Jean-Marc was making related to FRMCS and 5G technology? Can you make a link between those two?
Yes, of course, the work, as I mentioned, is already ongoing with the working parties and with the sector. And our aim is to deliver a recommendation, which is the technical content of the future legislation, by the end of 2021, to be adopted by Commission by legislation during 2022. Concerning the part related to the FRMCS, it is clear that we will not have the complete set of specification for FRMCS, but what we will have is the interfaces, so that at least for the onboard architecture, you can have this plug and play, or as close as possible to a plug and play module for the future radio when it will be available at commercial conditions. And we will have indicated the steps and the strategies that infrastructure manager must guarantee and put in place. They cannot switch over to FRMCS from one day to the next if they have today GSMR. We have to balance the protection of the traffic and investment of railway undertaking, especially freight, with the need of infrastructure manager to migrate to FRMCS. So there will be some obligation in terms of how much time in advance the dates for the migration will be published.
Thanks, Pio. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, we are slightly overrunning, but the plan is to carry on for another 5 minutes or so in order to try and squeeze as many questions in as possible. And for those of you who have asked questions on the question thing, and if we don't get to your question, don't worry, because all the questions get picked up. And they will hopefully be responded to. Andy, going way back right to the very beginning of this afternoon and our session, in your presentation, you spoke about best in class from Rail. It would be interesting to know how you judge what is best in class as far as you're concerned, but also how you intend to publicize what you perceive the best in class. And just whilst you are about to answer that question, we're going to put up on the screen poll number 4. So whilst Andy is answering that question, poll number 4 is going to come up on the screen so that you can vote on that. And you're not going to get it read out this time. You can all read it yourselves. Andy, over you go. On you go.
It's a good question. One of the things that we're looking at is obviously what works commercially for what services do passengers use. So at the moment we're seeing increasing interest in night trains, diminution of short-haul air, and obviously recent events will have a long-term effect on that as well. But also we're seeing the potential for freight moving to autonomous trucks is not happening at anything like the rate that some of the promoters of that autonomy would suggest. Touching on what Juliana said earlier as well, one of the things that we will be able to do is run pilots and lighthouse projects showing people what we think is possible. We will be inviting people to join in those activities. What we will probably seek to do is release some indicative papers that will show this is what we think we would like to test, but please can people contribute. We do have a dedicated email address. If people have suggestions to send in, they can email innovations@railbaltica.org. And we will look at those emails. Obviously, depending on how many come in, we may not be able to get back to all of them straight away. There's a lot of scope for looking at what has worked, what hasn't worked, and also, like I touched on right at the beginning, why did things not work? If they didn't work just because the technology wasn't there 20 years ago, then maybe they could work now. So let's consider those things as well. Yep.
Yes, it could well be that there are some, because I think you mentioned right early on in your presentation something that was trialed several years ago in Italy, which didn't actually sort of see the light of day, as it were, then, but the time for which might be right now.
Yeah, container handling, especially across transport modes and also across railway gauges.
And this is another question that floated in earlier on. So thank you for raising that, Andy. I'm going to come to that in a second. Meanwhile, the final poll, which was the question was, which area do you think, or zero impact, which area do you think will most help achieve zero impact over the life cycle of the infrastructure? And it seems that the overwhelming answer to that is energy. And making sure that that there is efficiency and monitoring of energy. And I know that in both Jean-Marc and Andy's presentations, the project is looking very closely at how they use energy, or what energy sources they will use, and ensuring that it is, of course, renewable wherever possible. Now, I'd like, just because Andy, you picked up just now on one, it was a question related to the 1520 gauge and the interfaces, and I'm just see if I can find the question, because it was to do with the interface between the 1435 gauge railway that you are constructing and the 1520 gauge railway that you're going to find when you get to the border, in particular with Poland. Sorry, not Poland. With the 1520 gauge railways that you've got in the Baltic states as well, and then couple that with the length of freight trains that you're going to be running on the project, on the Rail Baltica, and the slightly shorter trains lengths which you can have in other parts of Europe. Is that dichotomy featuring on your plan of things to look at?
Yeah, Jean-Marc here. Yes, I think I can try answer to that one. So we are looking very closely to all the interface with the 50/20 railways. As we say, the two railways should be really in full synergy. So whether it is for passenger or for freight, we have quite already a bunch of studies in different locations for all these ones. Typically we have just an example, some intermodal terminal with long trains, so 1050 meters, when you could make directly track-to-track transshipment of containers for one track to another of container trains. And for passenger, that's a similar approach when also there are several common stations in the international stations will be common for passengers. So all this passenger intermodality, even going to a Swiss approach for the timetabling synchronization, is also under study and under discussion with 50/20 railways operators. And so these aspects are very important for this. So to have a full transport system integrated. Regarding the question of the train freight train lengths, so this is it was indeed subject of many discussions when we are preparing the design guidelines for Rail Baltica. And so it was turned that we have the unique chance as a greenfield railways to implement longer trains. And then we had to decide, more than 750, shall we go to 1,500? Or shall we be in between 5,200? So at some point, it was a decision to implement 1,050 with already probably the best in Europe for the 1435 railways, and allow also to have a maximization of the exchange with the 50/20. For typically we are expecting to a very massification of these container trains with such a length. And other topic is also the loading gauge that has been implemented according to Swedish standards. So this is also wider and higher than GC, and that will also allow to have transportation of container, but also all type of trucks in very favorable conditions.
Jean-Marc, thank you very much. I'm going to give the last word now, Andy, to you, because we've had and there's one question there which is related to which links back to your presentation. And could you give some information on the status of implementation of the Rail Baltica project, perhaps linking it with any kind of setbacks you may have recently had because of the pandemic? But what challenges are you currently being faced with?
I think the first point that I would like to make is we haven't seen setbacks due to the pandemic. We've been quite fortunate in that regard. We've had meetings have been rescheduled and people are working from home and from the offices when they can and so on. But we already have quite a distributed team. So we have I'm based in Tallinn, Jean-Marc is based in Riga, and we have colleagues in Vilnius as well. So we're already split across our own offices of 3. We also have design teams working in various places in the rest of Europe as well. So we were quite fortunate that we could keep working the way that we had actually been working. In terms of milestones that are upcoming, obviously we need to know things like the TSI. On the road towards that, there'll be the spectrum announcements or the spectrum decisions later this year, which are quite a key thing for having confidence that the FRMCS options are going to be available. We haven't seen any particular obstacles that have arisen in the last few months. We haven't, for example, had any suppliers say, I'm sorry, I need to pause due to recent events. So that's been quite a positive. In terms of obstacles, we have the usual things you would expect with any large international project. We have to coordinate things, and we have to fit in with both what is the best for the long-term objectives, the kind of things that we've been talking about today with sustainability and so on, and also the practicalities of construction, of planning, of land acquisition, all those things also have to be taken into account. But yeah, things are ongoing. We've had some minor impact from recent events, but it hasn't actually delayed things.
Okay, Andy, thanks. That's great, and I think it's important also to note it's good that you've not had any setback from it, and indeed the railways overall, whilst there have been much fewer people travelling by train, I think freight has had the opportunity to almost have free reign of the infrastructure around Europe. And we've been able to keep an awful lot of the logistics of Europe moving using trains on routes which perhaps were not there before. So I think all of that is in essence an element of positiveness. From out of adversity comes success, and I think or every cloud is a silver lining is another little expression which. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call a halt at this point here. I'm very sorry if your question was not asked, and I'm very sorry if you've had your hand up in the chat and we haven't got to you. I will leave Jules to tell you in a moment how you will be able to get hold of the slides, other than the fact that they are already in the handout section on the screen in front of you, and also how you will be able to get hold of the replay for this event later on.
Indeed.
A few key words, if I may, Jules, just before I hand back to you.
Yes, please.
About engagement and the fact that quite clearly through an event like this and engaging as we are with each other is an important facet of understanding the challenges that Andy was just talking about, and indeed others have referred to as well in their presentations. Juliana's point about making sure that we have the skill sets necessary to develop the future railway, and that isn't always going to be grey-haired old fools like me, but people who are of a much younger and indeed more enthusiastic. No, that's not right. Anyway, younger generation who are able to also be part of the future. And the whole buzzword I think around all of this is communication, and it's about understanding from each other. From my part, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to virtually thank all of the speakers that have given up their time to prepare and also to present today, and to answer all of your questions, and to enrich this debate about what is a very exciting project, Rail Baltica. And with that, I will hand you back now to Jules for a couple of words and bid you all a good evening.
Thank you very much, Simon. Every cloud has a silver lining, as Simon said. Apologies once again from our side that we couldn't share the webcams of the speakers this afternoon, but I hope the insightful presentations and interactive debates has made up for the lack of looking at the speakers. Thank you to Simon for handling the situation and looking after the debate. Thank you to all the speakers for this afternoon. Just a quick notice. So handouts, as Simon said, is handouts available in the handout section. All the slides are available to download from there. The video will be available in the next day or so on our website to download. Coming up to the information about the next session, we will have a next webinar on the 28th of July, next webinar of this series, on talking about cybersecurity on critical rail infrastructure. So there's a little bit of connection from this session talking about CCS, control, command, and signaling, how now once the infrastructure is built, how to make sure there is no security breach on the signaling system, for example, or control system. We'll be talking about cybersecurity around those areas. Speakers from the Association of American Railroads, AAR, and MBTA from Boston, and Waterfall Security Solutions. So please sign up for this session for the 28th of July. So thank you very much once again to all the speakers. A special thanks to Rail Baltica and Simon Fletcher for this session. And I hope to see all of the audience. I hope to see all of you once again in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.